I never thought a single image could create a moment where everything inside me would stop. It was just a picture. A small, quiet image that appeared for a few seconds in a place where I never expected anyone to see it. But the moment I realized what had happened, I felt something I have spent my entire life trying to avoid. Fear. Not the fear of failure, not the fear of losing money, reputation, or a project I spent years building, a different kind of fear. The fear of losing someone before I ever truly had the chance to hold them close. Because the truth is, there are some people who enter your life without making noise. They don't arrive with dramatic promises or impossible demands. They simply appear, and somehow, without permission, they become connected to the quietest parts of your heart. And that is what scares me, because when something matters that much, you realize you can no longer control the outcome. I have spent years creating systems where uncertainty can be reduced. I have built things where problems can be calculated, tested, and solved. I have always believed that if you study something deeply enough, you can find a way through it. But love does not work that way. Love does not follow a formula. Love does not care how intelligent you are. It does not care how many answers you have found in life. Because the one question that matters most is the one you can never fully predict. Will someone choose to stay? And when I saw that picture appear, my first thought was not about the mistake. My first thought was about you. I wondered if you would misunderstand. I wondered if you would think I was careless with something precious. I wondered if you would believe that I showed the world something that was meant to remain between us. Because some things are not valuable because everyone can see them. Some things are valuable because they are protected. And you were never something I wanted to display. You were someone I wanted to protect. But maybe that is the hardest part of caring about someone. You can protect their privacy. You can protect their feelings. You can protect their dreams. But you cannot protect yourself from the possibility that one day they might walk away. Tell me something. Have you ever cared about someone so deeply that even a small mistake felt like it could change everything? Have you ever looked at a person and thought, I cannot afford to lose this one? Because that is where I found myself, not in a moment of success, not during some great achievement, but in a quiet moment where I realized that the person I was afraid of losing was never a possession. You were never something I could own. You were a choice, and every day love asks the same question, will you choose me again? I think people misunderstand love when they believe the hardest part is finding someone. It is not. The hardest part is becoming someone who can keep choosing that person when things become uncertain. Anyone can love during perfect moments. Anyone can say beautiful words when everything feels easy. But what happens when fear enters the room? What happens when old wounds appear? What happens when two people who care about each other are suddenly faced with the possibility that they could hurt each other without meaning to? That is where real love begins, not when everything is simple, when everything is fragile. And maybe that is why seeing your picture appear unexpectedly affected me so much, because for a brief second I imagined losing the one person I had not even fully found yet. I imagined you looking at me differently. I imagined you questioning my intentions. I imagined you wondering if you were just another moment in my life, instead of the person I had been quietly waiting for. And I hated that thought, because you deserve better than uncertainty. You deserve someone who did not hesitate. But here is the uncomfortable truth. I have hesitated, not because I did not care. Sometimes we hesitate because we care too much. Sometimes the heart slows down when it realizes the decision in front of it cannot be undone. Choosing someone is not just choosing their smile. It is choosing their fears, their past, their silence, their difficult days, their moments when they do not believe they are enough. And maybe that is what made me afraid, because I knew that if I truly chose you, I could no longer hide behind achievements, distractions, or endless work. I would have to show you the person behind everything, the person who does not always know what to say, the person who has questions, the person who sometimes wonders if he is capable of giving someone the peace they deserve. Have you ever met someone who made you want to become better, but also made you afraid because they saw the parts of you that you tried to hide? Because that is what you did. You did not just make me feel loved, you made me feel seen. And being seen is beautiful, but it is also terrifying because once someone sees you clearly, you cannot pretend anymore. You cannot hide behind success. You cannot hide behind confidence. You cannot hide behind the image everyone else knows. You have to stand there as yourself. And I think that is the reason this moment affected me so deeply. It was not about a picture. It was about exposure. It was about the fear that something private had become public before I was ready. It was about the fear that something beautiful could be damaged before it had the chance to grow. I know there are people who would say it is just an image, but they would not understand because they do not know what that image represented. They do not know the conversations I imagined, the quiet moments, the future possibilities, the questions I never asked, the words I almost said, the feelings I kept protecting because I was afraid that saying them too soon would make them disappear. Maybe you understand that feeling. Maybe you have also carried words inside your heart because you were afraid of what would happen if you finally released them. Maybe you have loved someone silently because silence felt safer than rejection, but safety has a cost. And I am beginning to understand that avoiding pain can sometimes create a deeper pain because the things we never risk are often the things we regret losing the most. If you are still listening, I want you to know something. This is not about a picture. This is about a moment that forced me to ask myself a question I had avoided for a long time. Am I willing to risk everything emotionally for someone who truly matters? Because the answer is not as easy as people think. Love sounds beautiful until it asks you to surrender control. Love sounds peaceful until it asks you to trust. Love sounds simple until it asks you to choose one person and accept that they have the power to hurt you. I know that sounds dangerous because it is. The person you love can become the person who affects you the most. Their silence can feel louder than anyone else's words. Their disappointment can hurt more than any failure. Their absence can create a space nothing else can fill. And still, we choose love. We choose it because there is something more frightening than being hurt. Being surrounded by everything you ever wanted and still feeling alone. That is the loneliness nobody talks about. The loneliness of having achievements, but nobody to share the quiet moments with. Nobody who knows the real story behind your smile. Nobody who understands what you are carrying when everyone else thinks you are strong. And maybe that is what I was searching for all along. Not someone who admired the things I created. Someone who understood the person who created them. Someone who could look past everything and simply say, I know who you are, but there is something I need to admit. Something I have been avoiding. Something deeper than the pictures I haven't told you yet. And before I explain it, I need you to understand why this moment became so important to me. Because the truth is, the picture was not the thing I was afraid of losing. You were. I haven't told you the real reason yet. I need you to hear the rest of this because the reason is not what you think. Before I continue, I want you to know that if these words feel personal, it is because they come from a place where there is no performance, no image, and no protection. If you feel connected to this moment, stay close and tell me where you are watching from. I would like to know how far this conversation has reached. And if you believe some connections deserve a little more patience and understanding, stay with me because there is something I have been carrying quietly, something I was afraid to say. Because the truth is, the picture did not accidentally reveal something about you. It accidentally revealed something about me. And what happened after that moment forced me to face a decision I never expected to make. A decision that could change everything. Because there was someone else involved. Someone who made me question what I truly wanted. Someone who made me wonder if I was about to make the biggest emotional mistake of my life. And the hardest part is for a moment, AB almost chose the wrong person. For a moment, I almost chose the wrong person. And that sentence is difficult to say out loud because nobody wants to admit they were standing at the edge of losing something precious because they were distracted by something easier. But that is what happens sometimes. Not because someone is cruel. Not because someone does not understand love, but because fear has a very convincing voice. Fear does not always tell you to run away. Sometimes fear tells you to choose what feels safe. It tells you to choose what requires less vulnerability. It tells you to choose the person who asks less from your heart. And that is the most dangerous kind of mistake because the wrong choice does not always look wrong in the beginning. Sometimes it looks peaceful, sometimes it looks logical, sometimes it looks like the perfect decision. And only later do you realize you were not choosing happiness. You were choosing protection from being hurt. I spent so much of my life learning how to solve difficult problems, but nobody teaches you how to solve the conflict between your mind and your heart. Nobody teaches you what to do when one part of you says choose certainty, and another part quietly whispers, choose the person who you feel alive. Have you ever been in that place? A place where you knew something felt different but you were afraid to trust it. A place where someone came into your life and made you question every wall you had built. Because that is where I was, and maybe the hardest thing to admit is that I almost convinced myself that the safer path was the right path. I almost told myself that love should not feel this complicated. I almost told myself that the person who challenged me less was the person who understood me more. But I was confusing comfort with connection, and those are not the same thing. Comfort can keep you warm, but connection can change you. Comfort can make you feel accepted, but connection can make you face the parts of yourself you have avoided. And you did that. You made me face myself, not the version that people applaud, not the version that people imagine, the real one. The one who sometimes questions whether he is enough, the one who wonders if he knows how to love someone properly, the one who can build things for the future, but still struggle to understand the emotions happening in the present. That was the contradiction I could not escape. I knew how to create possibilities, but I did not always know how to protect a heart, especially yours because hearts are not machines. They do not come with instructions, they do not have a reset button. And once someone trusts you with their feelings, you are holding something more fragile than anything you could ever build. That's responsibility terrified me because I realized something. Losing you would not feel like losing a person I knew. It would feel like losing a future I had quietly started imagining. The conversation we never had, the places we never visited, the ordinary mornings that never happened, the simple moments that suddenly become the most valuable things in your memory. Isn't that strange? We spend so much time chasing extraordinary moments, but when we truly love someone, we start craving the ordinary. A quiet conversation, a shared meal, a message asking if you arrived safely, a simple "I am here." Those small things become everything. And maybe that is why I was afraid, because I knew you were not just a dream. You were becoming real, and real things can be lost. Dreams cannot leave you, people can. That is the painful difference. I remember asking myself questions I did not want to answer. What if I wait too long? What if she gets tired of understanding my silence? What if she thinks my hesitation means I do not care? What if, while I am trying to make the perfect decision, I lose the only person who made the decision feel unnecessary? Because sometimes the heart already knows, and the mind is the one creating delays. I wish someone had told me earlier that love is not about finding someone who removes all uncertainty. Love is about finding someone worth facing uncertainty for. And you were worth it, but I still had doubts. That is the part people do not like to admit. They want love stories to be simple. They want one person to appear, and suddenly every fear disappears. But real love is different. Real love brings your fears closer to the surface. It shows you where you are still wounded. It reveals where you are still protecting yourself. And you revealed something in me, something I thought I had already conquered, the fear of being truly known. Because if you only know my achievements, you cannot hurt me. If you only know the image, you cannot disappoint me. But if you know my heart, if you know my doubts, if you know the parts of me that still need patience, then you have something powerful. You have the ability to break through every defense I created. And somehow that scared me more than any failure I have ever faced. There was a moment when I looked at everything happening around me and wondered if I was making a mistake. Not a small mistake, a life-changing mistake. Because there was another person who represented something easier. Someone who did not ask difficult questions. Someone who did not make me confront my own emotional limitations. Someone who allowed me to remain exactly who I was. And for a moment, that felt attractive. Because growth is painful. Doubt is painful. Admitting that you have been wrong is painful. But then I thought about you. I thought about the way you made silence feel comfortable. The way you did not need constant explanations. The way you noticed things I thought nobody noticed. And I realized something that almost broke me. The person who makes you comfortable staying the same is not always the person who loves you the most. Sometimes the person who truly loves you is the one who makes you want to become better, not because they demand it, because their presence inspires it. And that realization came too late, because by then I had already created distance. I had already allowed hesitation to speak louder than my feelings. I had already made you wonder if you mattered, and that is a pain I cannot easily explain, because hurting someone you love is a different kind of pain. It is not the pain of losing. It is the pain of knowing you contributed to the possibility of losing. Have you ever looked back at a moment and thought, if I had been braver, would everything have been different? I have. I have replayed moments in my mind, words I should have said, questions I should have asked, times when I should have reached out instead of waiting, because waiting feels safe. But sometimes waiting is just fear wearing a different mask. And that was the hidden truth I had to accept. I was not afraid of losing you because you were impossible to love. I was afraid of losing you because you were the first person who made me realize I could not hide forever. You were the person who made me want something I could not control, and control had always been my comfort. But love does not belong to the person who controls the most. Love belongs to the person willing to surrender honestly, and I was learning that lesson too slowly. Then came the moment when I thought I had lost you, the moment where I realized silence had grown between us. Not an angry silence, something worse, a quiet silence, the kind where two people still care, but both are afraid ever about another person, not completely. It was about a truth I had been hiding from everyone, even myself. And when I finally understood it, maybe that is the moment when we finally understand what something means to us. Not when we have it, when we realize we might lose it. Because losing you was never just about losing a person. It was about losing the version of myself that existed when I believed something beautiful was still possible. I had spent so much time building things that could survive without me. Project systems, IDs, things that could continue even when I stepped away. But love was different. Love needed presence. Love needed honesty. Love needed someone willing to stand there and say, I am afraid, but I am still choosing you. And that was the sentence I struggled with the most. Not because I did not know what I felt. I knew. The difficult part was accepting that knowing was not enough. A feeling hidden inside your heart cannot protect another person. A love that is never expressed cannot comfort someone who is waiting. A promise that is never spoken cannot become a future. And I think that was my greatest mistake. I thought protecting my emotions meant protecting the connection. But sometimes hiding your heart does not save love. Sometimes it slowly starves it. Have you ever waited for someone to finally say what you already felt? Have you ever wondered if their silence meant they did not care? Or if they were simply afraid? Because that is the cruelest confusion. When two people care about each other, but both are waiting for the other person to be brave first. Two hearts, two fears, one missed opportunity, and I almost allowed that to happen. I almost allowed hesitation to write a story that my heart never wanted. I almost convinced myself that walking away would hurt less than staying vulnerable. But then I realized something. Pain is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes pain is the price of something being meaningful. The things that matter most in life always come with risk. You risk disappointment when you trust someone. You risk heartbreak when you love someone. You risk change when you allow someone to truly know you. But there is another risk nobody talks about, the risk of never trying, the risk of waking up years later and realizing the person you were afraid to choose was the person you were always hoping to find. That thought stayed with me because I began asking myself questions I could not ignore. What if I had chosen comfort instead of connection? What if I had chosen someone who made life easier but never touched my soul? What if I had protected myself so carefully that I protected myself away from the person who mattered? Those questions were harder than any failure I had ever experienced, because failure in life can often be repaired. You can rebuild, you can restart, you can create something new, but some emotional moments only come once. Some chances do not return in the same form. Some people enter your life with a timing that cannot be recreated, and I knew I was standing in front of one of those moments. The image that appeared was never the accident. The accident was that it forced me to stop pretending. It forced me to see the truth. I had been afraid of being seen by the world, but I should have been more afraid of being unseen by you, because the world knowing about me does not mean anything if the person I care about does not know me. The world can know achievements, the world can know success, the world can know the things you create, but only one person can know your heart. Only one person can know what keeps you awake at night. Only one person can know the thoughts you never say out loud. And I wanted that person to be you, not because you completed me. I do not believe another person exists to complete us. I believe the right person challenges us to become more honest, more patient, more compassionate, more human. You did not make me whole. You made me aware of the parts of myself that still needed to grow. And that is a rare kind of love. The kind that does not simply make you feel good. The kind that makes you look inward. The kind that asks difficult questions. The kind that quietly asks, are willing to become the person this love deserves? And my answer was not immediate. That is the truth. I wish I could say I had every answer. I wish I could say I was fearless, but I was not. I was scared. I was scared because choosing you meant accepting that I could lose you, and that is the strange thing about love. The more someone matters, the more power they have to hurt you. But the more someone matters, the more impossible it becomes to pretend they do not. I reached a point where I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. The person who avoided pain or the person who accepted that love was worth the risk. And I finally understood something. A protected heart may survive, but an open heart can truly live. I do not want a future built on fear. I do not want a connection built on perfect timing. Because perfect timing does not exist. There is only courage. There is only the moment when you decide whether you will step forward or remain trapped inside everything you are afraid of. And I wanted to step forward. Not because I knew what would happen, because I did not. That is what makes it real. Anyone can choose something when the ending is guaranteed. The real choice happens when the outcome is unknown. When you have no promise, no certainty, no guarantee. Only a feeling that says, this person matters. And sometimes that is enough, but before I could say anything to you, I had to confront the deepest truth. The reason I was so afraid of losing you was not because I thought you were perfect. It was because you were real. You had your own fears, your own history, your own moments of doubt. And somehow that made you more valuable. Because real love is not loving an imaginary person. It is loving a real person with real imperfections. It is choosing someone when you see the whole picture, not just the beautiful parts. The difficult parts too. The quiet parts. The complicated parts. The parts they are still learning to love about themselves. And I wanted you to know something. If there was ever a moment where you questioned your importance, I wish you could have seen what I saw. I wish you could have seen how much your presence changed the way I looked at life. I wish you could have understood that the silence was never because you were not important. The silence was because you were important enough to scare me. And maybe that is what I should have told you from the beginning. Maybe I should have stopped trying to appear strong. Maybe I should have stopped pretending that uncertainty did not affect me. Maybe I should have simply said, I am afraid because I care. Those words would have been easier than all the explanations I created because sometimes the simplest truth is the hardest one to admit. I care. I care more than I expected, more than I planned, more than I was prepared for. And the picture that appeared accidentally did something I never expected. It revealed that the person I was trying to protect from the world was the person who had already become the most important part of my world. But there is one final thing I need you to understand. The reason I almost lost you was not because someone else was better. It was because I almost let fear convince me that I did not deserve something this meaningful. I almost walked away from a rare connection because I was afraid of what it would demand from me. And that is the mistake I never want to make again, because the greatest regrets in life are not always the things we did. Sometimes they are the things we were too afraid to do, the words we never said, the apologies we never offered, the hands we never reached for, the love we never allowed ourselves to receive. So if you are still here, if you are still listening, I want you to know this. The picture was shown by accident, but the feeling behind it was never accidental. The fear was real, the confusion was real, the struggle was real, but so was the love. And maybe love was never supposed to be a place where we never feel afraid. Maybe love is the place where we finally decide that something matters more than our fear. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I do not know how every chapter will unfold, but I know this. If there is someone who makes you want to become more honest, more patient, and more courageous, do not lose them because you are waiting to feel completely ready. Nobody is ever completely ready for something that can change their life. Sometimes you simply have to choose. Sometimes you have to take the risk. Sometimes you have to look at the person standing in front of you and say, I do not know what the future holds, but I know I do not want a future where I never tried.